In international news, Israeli officials went to Moscow in a last-ditch attempt to try and talk the Kremlin out of supplying the Syrian regime with anti-aircraft missiles, which would have the range and power to target civilian and military aircraft over Tel Aviv. Joining me now from Washington is Emanuele Ottolenghi. He's a senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Otto, thanks for coming on. Explain to us what Israel's involvement means now.
The Israelis are concerned that the transfer of this kind of weaponry to Syria will restrain significantly their ability to interfere with Syria's repeated attempt to transfer weapons to Hezbollah and other actors in the region. B, of course, it is the possibility that Syria could threaten with these weaponry both military but more importantly civilian air traffic inside Israel's skies. And the third concern, of course, is the possibility that as Syria falls apart, these weapons may fall into the hands of Syria's proxies, but most importantly the Iranian regime. Iran has tried in the past to buy the S-300 from Russia. The S-300 is one of the most advanced anti-aircraft defense systems on the market right now. It can engage up to 100 targets at the same time, or rather monitor them and engage 12 simultaneously. So if Israel were ever to consider a preemptive strike against Iran's nuclear facilities, that kind of system would make it very difficult. And equally, if Israel was trying to preempt transfer of chemical weapons or other advanced military systems to Hezbollah from Syria, with Syria having that system, Israeli operations would be extremely complicated.
Now, Russia's role in all of this, it has an agreement with the Syrian government to provide it with these particular missiles, but I was reading, there's a lot of diplomacy going on right now, but one unnamed diplomat was saying Russia doesn't care so much about the conflict in Syria, to put it, mildly, as long as it gets paid for its missiles. So if the Israeli government manages to somehow disarm or disable these missiles, Russia's not that concerned about it as long as it's seen to be fulfilling its side of the agreement. Does that sound like it makes sense to you?
Well, imagine you're selling an advanced technological product on the market and you deliver it to a client and somebody proves that your system is good for nothing. It's not good publicity. The Russians certainly have a commercial interest in providing this weaponry, and they certainly are not wholly driven by political concerns in supplying Syria with this kind of weaponry. But they certainly do not want their most advanced, most sophisticated and most coveted air defense system to flop. So I don't think that that's what they want. I think that what the Russians want is leverage in the region. The Russians are extremely angry at the way the Libya crisis developed back in 2011, when they gave consent to limited international intervention. And that consent was then used to allow NATO to basically topple Gaddafi. So they don't want a repetition of that, and that is why they're supplying weapons. Now, whether they will eventually go ahead and carry out the supply, it's an open question. In a few years back, the same dynamic developed with Iran, and repeated entreaties by the Israelis and the United States and other Western countries eventually convinced Russia to drop the sale of S-300 to Iran. We may see the same, but clearly the Russians are trying to extract the price.
Emanuele Ottolenghi, Senior Fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you for your analysis, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.